Kemp, the managing editor of CNBC International Digital, has joined us around the desk with more. And Ted, nice to see you this morning. And it's quite good that we've got you here, because so much of what we're seeing in the West is actually coming through digital channels. The internet is clearly being used as some means to distribute information within China, it would seem, in spite of the great firewall of China. We have to obviously carefully calibrate the significance of these protests in terms of, are they political? Are they COVID related? But what's your assessment of what we're seeing?
Well, you touched on an important point there, Jeff, because, this is not Hong Kong. This is not Tiananmen. Those were violent, they were focused, they were kinetic in a very big way. But what's interesting about this, what's extraordinary about what we're seeing right now, like just literally kicking off this weekend, is the breadth of these protests. And as you were saying, just the very fact that so many of these videos are getting through to us when the Chinese authorities, the Chinese security apparatus is constantly, suppressing it. You called it cat and mouse before. Just the fact that so many of them are getting through, including from places like Xinjiang, which is one of the most oppressed places on the planet, that gives us a clue to the breadth of it.
China has such a strong grip on the internet that it has, regulators there. It's using artificial intelligence. It's very much dominant when it comes to the internet. How is it possible that you can see citizens circumvent all of these firewalls and communicate via social media in this vein?
That's such a great question, because stuff's coming directly out of WeChat. It's obviously VPNs come into play. We always talk about VPNs when we talk about the Chinese beating their firewall. But it feels like they're getting better at it. That's one thing I feel confident in saying. In terms of the actual technique underlying it, I don't know, but it does feel like either there's so much of it that eventually some of it's going to get through, or they're just getting more skilled at it. The fact that a lot of these people are students might bear some worth examining.
We know it is, in your words, this is not Tiananmen. This is not Hong Kong. And I think it's very important to say that, and you have said it, and I'll reiterate the point, absolutely, it is not. Yet. And that's my point. Tiananmen wasn't Tiananmen until it was Tiananmen. Hong Kong wasn't Hong Kong, the protest, until it built up a massive head of steam as well. So we're in the foothills of something. It may be that's as high as we get on this crisis. But is there something going on? And again, it's about COVID. It's a little bit about the politics. I think all protests, in my study of history, are always about economics for people as well. Yeah. And we know the economy is slowing aggressively. We know that there are huge complaints and problems about where the property market has gone. It is not Hong Kong. It is not Tiananmen. But is there something going on that it could be the seed of something bigger to come?
We reached a tipping point, that is clear, because not only is it widespread, it's also sudden. It all seems to have kicked off at once. I think that part of what is going on, if I could dare to examine the collective psychology of what's going on in China, is that there was some hope put forth that measures would be withdrawn a bit. I think people got optimistic, and then lo and behold, cases went up. Shanghai's on the worst lockdown that it's been in. All of a sudden, everybody's back in lockdown. And I think it's easy for us. We often talk about, the perils and just probably feeling of helplessness when you are locked down, when you're locked into your apartment. But something that goes under-examined, I think, is that even if you're not locked down, you're always going to be wondering, am I next? Well, they got the block next door last week. By the way, didn't announce it because they're very rarely announced. There's this almost sort of capriciousness to the way that Beijing is, and actually it's not even Beijing, the way that local authorities are mandating certain actions be taken. And I think that people are under stress. What we're hearing from the people that we're talking to there is that you're under stress that that you don't know when you'll be next. Do I have enough food at home? And I think that sort of profound disruption is getting people to a point, at least many of them, where they just have decided they can't take it anymore.
Just to pick up on Steve's point, I mean, obviously there are a host of reasons why people are doing what they are doing in Chinese cities at the moment. If you looked at the Shanghai protest, I think what was very notable was how young a lot of the protesters who were bold enough to make the political statements or the slogans as they were chanting. And it does occur to me, you've got 8 million graduates who are pouring out of Chinese universities every year. looking for a job in an economy that is slowing rapidly at a point where we've got near 20% youth unemployment in China. And that's the dangerous cocktail here, I think, for the Communist Party at this point. Yes, people are unhappy about the COVID lockdowns, but I guess the challenge for the authorities, and perhaps why they're not being so heavy-handed, is they don't want to generate a more extreme response from people who feel they have little hope in this economy at the moment. The whole lying down phenomena, you know, we talk about, you know, the sort of quitting in your job. You stay in your job, but you've basically given up and you're just here for the money. There is this phenomena in China, the lying down phenomena, where young people are just saying, you know what, it's just not worth the effort to work so hard if I'm not going to get a job here and pay back my student loans. Are we seeing something like this emerging in the data that's telling us actually things are a lot worse in the underlying economy than maybe we've been led to believe?
Well, you know, the data depends on whose data you want. You want Chinese data, or do you want the outside data? But if you look at, say, for example, data from, if you examine Baidu's city traffic data, some cities in Beijing recently have gone down to almost zero street traffic. You know, 95% reduction in street traffic. Chongqing, more than 99% reduction in train traffic. And so, you know, that's what we're always doing with China. We're always reading the tea leaves and trying to get behind it, electricity usage and this and that. And you've got a growing number of people, I won't call it a consensus yet, but there are a growing number of economists who are saying things like, Ruchir Sharma comes to mind, saying things like, looks like 2.5% is the new normal. And if you imagine being one of those 21, 22-year-old students, you're probably an only child. Your entire life, you've been raised in a country that just does nothing but rocket higher and higher and higher. You have never known anything different. And now suddenly you come out of school, and what have you got? You know, you've got this crazy slowdown. You've got these limitations on where you can go and what you can do. Yeah, I mean, I think the frustration there is real. And if you really just try to put yourself in their heads, I get it.
One of the other big stories that's been kicking around China in recent years has been Taiwan, the traffic and what's going on in the South China Sea, as opposed to, say, Chongqing and the growth dynamics on the ground. And you see a domestic story unfolding like that, and I'm sure that the commentators have been looking into this one. What does it mean for the geopolitics? Where does this leave China's greater ambitions around Taiwan, given all the saber rattling we've had in recent months?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, when you've got an unhappy population and you are a dictator, you know, an authoritarian government, that's really not the right time to make them more unhappy by undertaking some new venture that might go wrong, as Vladimir Putin has learned in Ukraine, you know, a very brutal lesson in Ukraine to that effect. So I think that, you know, I could be wrong about this, I'm speculating, but if I'm Xi Jinping, I'm going to try to figure this one out, try to figure out how to make this thing work. See, here's another thing, too, that gets under-examined. Beijing does not mandate actions to the provinces and the cities. It mandates goals. It says, here's a number, hit it. They don't care how they do it. Here's a number of cases, maximum number of COVID cases I want to see. Hit that number. We don't care how you do it. So from place to place within China, you have this mixed, motley kind of pattern of approaches. But it also creates an incentive structure for those lower level Communist Party folks. If you want to become a big guy and move up the ladder, you take no chances. And so as a result, we're seeing this like push into, you know, like the most severe types of steps. Over the weekend, Global Times reported 40,000 new cases on Sunday, and the health authorities are sending what they call working groups to go out to talk to these municipal governors, these provincial governors, and try to get them to sort of, hey, there's a middle way here. Try to make it more, what their word is, precise approach to COVID. So there is an effort, but China is a big country, 1.4 billion people. This would require a monumental government effort just to try to get everybody on the same page. They got a long way to go.